Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. Perhaps the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world.
Hey there listeners, welcome to today's episode of Ask Denis. The Ask Denis is a freestyle episode that I do once a week, whereby I'm either asked a question by our listeners or I share my thoughts, insights, and experiences from working with many leaders around the globe. Now, every now and then I get these questions coming into me, and I've got one today which is really interesting, and that is because I've been talking about reflection and the power of reflecting. In fact, recently I did an episode called the 3x3 Reflection Model, and if you haven't already checked that out, go ahead and check out that episode. But somebody's asked me the question, how often should leaders reflect? And that's a very good question because how often should you do it? Well, I think the answer to that is it really depends. It really depends on what you're working on, and it really depends on what you need going forward. Now, there's various leaders who actually don't do any reflection at all, and that's not good because I think they're losing out on a grand opportunity to learn. Not just for them, but also possibly for their teams and for individuals within their teams. Because if they can learn from what they're doing, that's actually going to be a very important thing. You see, none of us, you as a listener or myself as the podcast host, and whatever we're doing, being a podcast host is really important because I have learnt how to do this podcast over and over again, and I'm reflecting to take time out to understand how I can improve it, how I can be better. How I can be better as an interviewer, how I can be better as in the Ask Denis side of things as well. But also in my own business, as a coach, as a facilitator, and as a leader of the organization. I take time out to think as well. I take time out to reflect and learn. As I was saying before, none of us are where we are today without learning from the past. And a reflection is a great way of doing it. Now, for some of you, you may need to reflect on various projects that you're working on. You may want to reflect on a piece of work or an initiative that you're working on. You may reflect quarter of a way through, halfway through, three-quarters of the way through, and at the end as well, but definitely at the end. Whether it's a week, you should reflect on that week that's just passed, reflect on the month that's just been, and also reflect on the quarter. Of course, at the end of the year, take time to reflect out on the year. It doesn't take very long. It tends to be 3 questions, as I say on that episode, the 3x3. But I would actually highly recommend you to go and listen to it. 3 simple questions. What went well? What could I have done differently? And what will I do differently now going forward? 3 simple questions that have massive impact for you and your team and your organization. Now, the other thing I would say to you is that what I mentioned before, none of us are where we are today without learning from things. And you see, people make mistakes. People go ahead and do things. Or things have gone well, but things could have been done better. And so the reflection time is the time to actually do this and to actually take stock, stop, But what a lot of leaders do? No, they tend to go on to the next thing or the next shiny thing that comes along and move on. And they miss that opportunity of learning, reflecting, and working on that to move forward. You see, this isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. And as you have different milestones to work on, you'll work through things. But if you can reflect to see how you can learn from the past, it's going to make your future look even better. So the thing that I'm going to suggest you do is that you do the reflection because it's really important for you. And I've already addressed why you should do it. The second thing, another key step, is for you to actually then pull an action plan together. And that relates to question 3. What will we do now differently going forward? And the action plan could be a few things. It could be several things, but keep it simple. Things that you need to do, things you need to implement, things you need to get on with to help things move forward as a result of doing a reflection. Now, there might be some things that you've gone and done a reflection with, but you realize things are going well. We've done well. There's nothing really for us to actually improve on, so let's move forward. So the action plan there is, let's move forward. But the key here is the third step, which is going to be the execution. It's the doing it. It's the making it happen. That's going to be really important because a lot of people may reflect, but they don't put an action plan together. Or those that do put an action plan together, they don't always execute on all the things that they come up with. The execution is going to be really important. Stop talking about things and make it happen. And so as you execute and do that, then you're going to get to a certain stage when you will need to reflect on what you've been working on. And so at times it could be a rinse and repeat kind of scenario, cycle that keeps going and going. But what we're doing is we're doing certain things, we're reviewing where we're going, and we're moving forward. It's a bit like you and I driving somewhere, or you and I flying somewhere. If you're flying from one country to another country, the pilot isn't just going to take it by chance and keep going based on the course that they put in front at the beginning of the flight. They're going to keep reviewing it. They're going to keep reflecting how things going. How's the fuel? What have we done here? What are we doing there? Because they need to adjust. And if you can adapt and move forward, that's going to be really important for us all. So team, listeners, really important for us to do the reflection, put the action plan in place and execute. But there is this one key word that I want to add to this whole area around how often should our leader reflect. And the key word is consistency. Whatever you choose as a cadence, as a regular thing, whatever you're wanting to do, make sure you are consistently doing it. If you start, stop, you're going to confuse people. But if you're doing it on a consistent basis, that's where you'll see the momentum starting to happen. That's when you'll start to see people growing. That's when you'll see the confidence of the organization, the team, the individuals start to grow as well. So, take time out to reflect. Do it as many times as you need to and what makes sense. Put an action plan together, execute, but make sure you're doing it on a consistent basis.
Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. Feel free to share them with your friends, your family, and your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or if there's a question you have for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode, then send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey, listeners, it's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.